Um, we are in possession of a secret that the rest of the world doesn't want to hear. And we've been going to the rest of the world saying, woe is me, listen to what we have to say, blah, 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 blah. And they're not listening. And I'm of the opinion to turn it on its head. We know stuff that the average person in the high street with their cell phone shoved in their back pocket or slapped to the head has no idea about. And when they come to us and they want us to tell them the secret, then they'll listen.
And I'll continue and say, until that day, they not only don't want to hear it, they are incapable of hearing it. All right, so my guest today is Roger Moller. Roger is a retired EMF consultant. Roger, welcome to the EMF Remedy Podcast.
Thank you, Keith. It's a pleasure to be here, and I'm glad to connect with you. Um, there aren't many of us electromagnetic surveyors in Britain, and it's nice to be able to talk to somebody who shares similar interests and provides similar services. I'm in a summer let for the winter, um, so I'm having to make do with whatever I can um, get by with in terms of facilities. So
Yeah, but I'm
uh,
jealous. I'm jealous of your books.
you're jealous of my books? Oh,
Well, yeah,
they're
you've
not
got.
even mine.
Well, that's we don't have to tell anyone.
Yeah, yeah. I must know what I'm talking about with all those books. Yeah, yeah. So, I was just watching your interview on CHD, and your story is a very familiar one of your particular path down this particular rabbit hole,
Ah,
and
yes.
shares a lot of similarities with my own. Um, it was 4 years before I knew what it was called. It was 2 years before I knew what it was called, and 4 years before I met anybody else who was electrohypersensitive.
So tell me your story. I want to hear your story about
Well,
how did you come to how did you come to realize that you were electrically sensitive?
I'm often asked that question. I worked for a before I worked for British Telecom, I worked for another telecoms company, developing voicemail systems based on computers. And after 5 years of that, it was all part of my plan to go into telephone system sales. And I moved out of the development lab and into telephone system sales, which after 2 months, I got my new digital 2G phone. I had a 1G phone up until that point, but I got a 2G phone. But what I didn't appreciate was that I was sitting maybe 4 or 5 yards from two FCTs. Now, they're not common here in the UK, but they're much more common in the States.
So why don't you give us a time frame for that? Was that the early '90s? And then you can explain the
Yeah, it was
FCT.
97. Yeah,
Okay.
97. But the thing was that we had, I don't know, 150 salesmen and engineers out in the field. And because we were on the 2G network and a 2G network supplier, we could call all our people for free using these two fixed cellular terminals, which were just underneath my desk.
Oh, wow.
And so they were busy. There was like two mobile phones inside the building going flat out all day, every day.
And so they interacted with the local cell tower.
Yeah, of course they had to work real hard because they were inside the building.
Right, right. My
Um,
goodness.
what really did it for me was I was driving in my car, my company car on the M25, which is the circular motorway around London. And all of a sudden it was like a cattle prod had been put on my head. And I was in the fast lane and I managed to just ease across onto the hard shoulder. And as I did so, my phone rang. Well, I knew enough to know that the data channel talks to the mast first. And once it's established a data link, which is done at full power, then it sets up the call and rings the phone. Well, that happened 3 days in a row, and I haven't used a mobile phone since.
Oh my goodness. So that was after you had been working near the
So,
FCT, is that right?
That's right. But it was the combination of 5 years in a lab surrounded by computers with all the covers off. It was a combination of changing from an analog 1G phone to a digital 2G phone. And it was a combination of not only sitting on top of these two FCTs, but I was the only salesman who had a computer under his desk, which I brought with me from my development lab. So I had all my contacts and stuff. So I was getting it every which way.
So what symptoms did you have, and then how long did it take you to figure out what that meant, and how long were you able to work after that?
Well, 5 years.
Oh
Five
gosh.
years I kept it going. But after that, 2002, I had to give it up. And then in 2006, I decided to take my disadvantage and turn it into an advantage. And that's when I became an electromagnetic surveyor.
So you're a lot smarter than me because I went for 30 30 something years. But that's what we do, right? You know,
Yeah,
men
yeah,
just
yeah.
we
People,
soldier on no matter what, right?
well, we're men, men tend to do that. And also when the rest of the world is telling you that it's all in your head and you should just get out and get a life and it can't possibly be true because the government and the industry and doctors and people in white coats are all telling us that it's all in our heads. Well, that's a big wave to counter.
It really is, and I just finished recording something this morning for my weekly audio podcast. And I say over and over again there, I'm about two things. One is a productive mindset, and the other is the whole accurate assessment and then effective remediation part of it.
Well, you
But
and I
but
differ.
the mindset, that is not to be discounted.
Multi-million pound projects that are going down the toilet, you have to be pretty robust. And I guess that was all part of my training.
Hmm. Hmm. But
Um,
but there's this whole part about everybody saying it's safe, and no matter where you turn, the people in the white coats, the medicos are going to tell you,
sure, sure, sure.
you're crazy, or just take these pills, or whatever it may be. At least that's been my experience and the experience of many that I've talked to.
Yeah, yeah.
And then, our friends and loved ones, they tell us, don't you know, this is as safe as, anything. So how did you manage to get away from that? That's what I mean
Okay.
by a productive mindset.
Well, as you can probably imagine, I've lost a lot of my friends and family, and I've been excluded from many, many things over the last 30 years.
Yeah.
And, it's quite simple. When I have friends who can't accommodate my needs, they're no longer my friends. I leave. That's it. I don't negotiate. I don't explain. I don't ask them I'll ask them to turn their stuff off. And if they say, well, no, I have to have it because the babysitter might call or the lover might call or the plumber or somebody. Whatever the explanation is, I don't give a damn because the thing about my, I'm a quick reactor. Some people are much slower reactors. So they may not know for 24 hours whether they've been blasted and then they'll just wilt. Whereas me, I can feel it. I can usually tell where it's coming from, and I can usually tell pretty much what it is.
Hmm.
And within 10 gigahertz, I can probably tell the frequency. So it's very much easier for me than the average person to link cause and effect.
That's great to be able to link the cause and effect, and it's not an easy thing to do to draw a hard line with friendships and business acquaintances and whatnot. But
Well,
I'm yeah.
it was surprisingly easy because I'm 70, I'm 71. So I was approaching retirement, which means you didn't have to put up with all that nonsense. Um, and also, it was unequivocal. There was no negotiation on my part. My body said, you need to get out of there now. That's it. And
Well,
so in that respect, the decision was easy. Like when my neighbors gave me 30 minutes to leave my home.
now, why did your neighbors give you 30 minutes to leave your home?
Well,
Goodness sakes.
I came home one day and suddenly I got the most incredible tinnitus
Mm.
and then an enormous headache, a bit like the cattle prod on the head thing. And I couldn't think straight. I could hardly talk. And I found my meters and put them on, and the neighbors in the apartment above had just turned on their wireless router, which
Uh,
was in the hallway of their apartment, which was right above the hallway of my apartment,
mm.
which meant that there was nowhere for me to go. And after 24 hours sleeping in my shielded bed inside my shielded bedroom, I went to them and said, "Look, I can't tolerate this." And they said, "Well, we'll turn it off for 30 minutes. You can get your things and go. Goodbye."
Mm.
And that was it. I left after 22 years. They gave me 24 hours in total to get out. And so I left. And so the decision to leave my home and walk away from everything was easy because I couldn't stay. I mean, I was in meltdown. I was completely gaga. I was not functioning. And the men in white coats would come and take me away and jab me full of something, and you wouldn't be talking to me now.
And so this was probably right at the end of the 90s or beginning of.
No, this was 2008.
Oh, this was 2008 by this time. Okay.
Yeah, yeah. So I was homeless.
Mm.
Um, and I was trying to run my business, which I'd been running from home. And yeah, I was homeless for 3 months on that occasion.
And now
And then,
by then you were already an EMF consultant.
oh yeah, yeah, I've been doing that since 2006. So, you know, um, but what I didn't tell you was in 2007. Now you might find this difficult to believe, but in 2007, I lost my sight in 9 months. I went blind.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, I was like, in February, I could see normally, and by October, I could see black or white.
Oh my
I had
goodness.
double cataracts. And thankfully, we have the national health here, and they replaced the lenses in my eyes in the December and in the following February. So within a couple of months, because a surveyor who can't use his eyes is no good to man nor beast.
Yes. Yeah. Wow.
So
Well,
as for why, I said to my optician, "Why do you think?" Well, he wasn't my optician. He was somebody I'd never seen before, but working at the opticians. I said, "Why do you think I've got cataracts?" He said, "Oh, electromagnetism, of course."
oh,
And of
no
course,
kidding. Very few
and my
people.
mouth dropped open. And he said, "Yes, yes, too much sunlight."
Oh.
Uh, he didn't ask if I was a skier or a welder or, played around with lasers, or he didn't ask any of that. He knew exactly what was wrong with me and why. And it was the speed with which he replied that struck me as being extraordinary. The answer was on the tip of his tongue.
Very interesting. And so if people don't already know, um, there's there is a great correlation between too much radio frequency radiation and cataracts.
Absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely. And
So
the interesting thing about it is this, and as one gets older, people don't realize this, but I learned this the hard way. So I don't know if you had the operation or you know anybody who has, but it's absolutely extraordinary. It takes about 15, 20 minutes. I said, of course, they use a robot, right? And they said, oh, no, 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 just a surgeon with a very sharp scalpel and a very steady hand. I was like, oh, all right then. But I mean, it was easy because I didn't have a choice. It was either sit there and be blind until I died or have the operation. So I had the operation. And after a couple of days, I took the patch off my eye and it was extraordinary. From everything being a blur, I'd always been short-sighted, so I had to wear glasses for distance. From everything being a blur, um, suddenly I could see every leaf on every tree, every branch, every twig, every star. It was extraordinary.
hmm,
So instead of two bits of data hitting my brain, like light or dark, there was 25 megabits a second hitting my brain, going,
hmm.
trees, leaves. But it took me months to learn to see again.
Oh my goodness.
Because during those short 9 months, when I lost my sight, my brain had scavenged bits of my visual cortex or whatever's in there and had repurposed it. So my warning to people who think they might have cataracts is get on the list. and get them done sooner rather than later. Because by the time you've been through the, oh, I really need stronger glasses, or we must get a bigger TV or something, by the time you've done all that, your brain has been quietly scavenging your visual abilities. And so when you do get the operation, you can see, but you can't make sense of the information that you're receiving. So that's why it's so important to get the operation done as soon as possible. And as you get older, I was only 57 at the time. As you get older, you get pushed further and further down the waiting list. So that's a lesson from firsthand experience.
Well, that's interesting. Getting pushed further down the waiting list. I've heard those words before, but for cataracts, which is generally older people, that, that doesn't seem to make a lot of sense. But I understand. Let's go back to you being an EMF consultant, and I'm
Sure,
guessing you did not go to one of the schools to become an EMF consultant. Is that right?
there are no schools.
Well,
At least they
th-
weren't back then.
okay, all right.
It's not in the UK. Not in the UK.
So they didn't have the GeoVitalist then. They didn't have the
Oh yeah, no, GeoVital.
building
They
by
were a new. GeoVital was a newcomer, and I don't rate them at all. But anyway,
and the building biologists and whatnot. But
well, the building biology it doesn't have any presence in Britain. Like, maybe it's because it's German in basis, or I don't know. But it's if you mention building biology to anybody here, they'll go, "What are you talking about?"
anyway, the point that what I lived through is I had a real technical bent ever since I was a little kid. And it's funny sometimes how the things we're attracted to can be the very things that harm us. So I was interested in
Like
radio
cigarettes.
when I was, 7 or 8 years old.
Yeah, me too. I had a crystal set.
Yeah, and then I continued into ham radio and all that kind of stuff, and
Uh-huh.
and then involved in high tech. My science project in there was resonance, and
Resonance.
I built when I was younger, I built a transmitter and a receiver, dead simple, not complicated, and it wasn't even my design, but it was a transmitter and a receiver. I could send my voice over a beam of reflected sunlight.
Hmm.
So by the time I realized my electrical sensitivity decades later, my transition from realizing uh, what was wrong with me to being able to assess my house to being able to help others with in-home assessments was just a matter of months. I mean, most of everything I needed to know was already there. So you're another person who I'm talking to that had to pick it up. This is not a science that is 100 years old. That there are no university degree programs in this and whatnot. So to say a little bit about how you got started and the equipment and the approach that you took.
Well, as a kid, I used to mess about with all sorts of things, and I got my first motorbike when I was 11, and got my first car when I was 12. And I've always enjoyed fixing things. I graduated high school with a certificate in physics and maths and engineering drawing, and then I went to college and learned to become an industrial engineer, which is not a profession that is known very much in the United Kingdom. It's better known in the US. So I had a technological background, and I started computer programming when I was still at school, learning Fortran language when I was about, I don't know, 18, I suppose, because it was the way of the future. And then I got myself a Commodore 64, and then a PC, and so on. So I've been around computers one way or another for at least 50 years. So that imposes a certain discipline on one's thinking. Um, but when I decided in 2006 that I would become an electromagnetic surveyor when there was no such thing. And the first two surveys I did for free, just to get my, feet under the table, as it were. And every survey I've done, pretty much, has taught me something. But I would submit, and I know you're in favor of accurate readings and all the rest of it. But my experience is that at least 50% of the value that I bring to my surveys is done with my two eyes.
Yeah, yeah. So go ahead and
And,
talk.
and also, I was trained as an NLP practitioner, which teaches you how to listen. And so when I do a survey, so I wanted to just tell you about my process because you might find this interesting, you might find it useful. Um, First of all, I used to charge at least twice what anybody else would charge. And the reason for that was that the more people pay, the more they listen. And if people weren't prepared to engage me um, at my price, then I didn't expect them to listen to what I had to say. So I wasn't going to waste my time on theirs. So that was one thing. The other thing was that I'd agree to go and do a survey, an on-site survey, and I would arrive an hour early and I'd do what I call a drive-by survey. So I would drive by the property, which I'd already seen on Google Earth and Street View and stuff like that. And I usually had the client give me a floor plan before I even arrived. So I drive around the area and look for substations and pylons and mobile masts and radio hams and whatever else was out there. And and then I would insist that they turned everything wireless off before I arrived, because quite frankly, if they'd left it on, I couldn't do the survey. I couldn't think straight. So, so when I walked into the house, of course, there would be all sorts of stuff still kicking off, which they didn't even know was wireless, and therefore hadn't turned it off. So we'd start by turning off all those things, and then we'd sit down for at least 20 minutes, usually about an hour, and I'd do a pre-survey consultation and tell them what it was all about and what I was doing and so on. And then I'd survey the house 4 times. The first time I'd go around with the client and they'd, take me into all the bedrooms and show me all the closets and all of that stuff and build a trust. Then I'd go around and do the electric fields, the electromagnetic fields, the magnetic fields, and all the time at the same time I'd be doing dirty electricity. And then after about 4 hours of this, I'd film everything. So I'd film the meters because what would happen is by the time I'd finished, I'd be so punch drunk that I didn't know, I wouldn't be able to remember which room I was in, let alone what scale the meter was on or whatever the hell it was. So I needed that backup to take with me so that I could go back and review it when I got back home. Um, and then after all of that, then we would sit down for another 20 minutes or half an hour or even an hour. And sometimes this would often involve other members of the family because usually it would only be one person who was affected. And, they brought me in against the objections of their family. And so it was important for me to bring everybody on board. And then I'd go away, go back home, spend a couple of days to get over it, and then start writing the report, having reviewed the video material so that I'd know what I'd done. But the floor plan was essential because it meant that when I was talking about bedroom two, they meant, oh, Joe's bedroom. Oh, that one. Oh, yeah, right. Or whatever. So I was establishing a common language. Um, and as you must have discovered yourself, when you're dealing with a new area, which is not common knowledge, you have to establish a language which is understandable for all parties.
Yeah, yeah, I agree. So for people who don't know, NLP stands for neuro linguistic programming. And
Yeah.
so when you're serving the needs of somebody in the family, typically the wife, but not always, who is sensitive, and you see the other family members going like this, what does that tell you, Roger, from a neurolinguistic programming perspective?
It tells me that they're skeptical with a capital S, and quite rightly so.
Yes,
So,
yes.
it just means I have to work a little harder to to empathize and sympathize and also rephrase things. In NLP, we call it reframing. Reframe things in language that they can relate to, because there's no point in talking gobbledygook to somebody who doesn't whose brain is switched off because you're using words they don't understand.
Right, right. Yeah, I had one evaluation where the wife had brought me in. I'm not picking on women. I don't know why it's typically,
Well, it's about 4 to 1
yeah.
in terms of sensitivity.
It was the wife who had brought me in, and the husband was sitting there like with his arms crossed and whatnot. And I extended. I usually start with the power on, and then I do go around and do the assessment, and then I turn it off, and then I make sure we find all the mobile devices and everything, so everything's really off, and then I can relax some, and I do the second evaluation. And on this instance, I left everything off for the wrap up at the end. And we had plenty of light by the window to see through, and the temperature wasn't so far off that we needed air conditioning or heating. But it was nice, and you know what I'm talking about, to be in a quiet house while you're trying to think and
Mhm.
have this conversation in the wrap up. And all of a sudden, the husband says, "Hey, my ears quit ringing." So it was a very instructive moment, and I think he realized his own electrical sensitivity in that meeting, and I haven't had that ever happen before. But that his ears would stop ringing just from having all the cell phones, all the other voluntary sources, and the power
Okay.
off and whatnot. It was amazing.
Well, that's interesting. One thing I wanted to mention, I also test for ultrasound
Ah, very interesting.
because ultrasound is a cause of tinnitus. And unless you eliminate that as a possible cofactor, you're barking up the wrong tree, as it were.
And so, what did your equipment look like to? Uh,
I have a little handheld bat detector, costs about $100. It measures up to 115 kilohertz, I think. Um, and basically, I mean, it's a 2-second job to go around the house with it and identify um, sources that may be contributing. But usually there aren't many, but they may have things like plug-in pest repellers. Um, and I also use it. I don't know if you realize that as you walk around, the brushing of your clothes and stuff like that, to us, we can hardly hear it, but to a cat or a dog, it screams loud. And so, one of the things that if ultrasound is present in the house, um, it's very easily missed. And one of the places you might find it, not only plug-in pest repellers, but you might find it in your car. They use ultrasound to fill the car with in case of a broken windscreen while it's parked. And if that's faulty, you can be driving along in your car with the ultrasound killing your hearing. And what that does is it breaks the calcium hairs in your ears, and you lose all your high frequency. So the ultrasound has to be eliminated if you want to make sure that your clients don't end up losing their hearing. And I suspect, I don't know this for a fact, but I suspect holding a microwave transmitter next to your head doesn't do your ears any good at all. And given that calcium is an electroconductive metal, well, it's holding it right next to your ear. And the other thing about hearing is this, that I believe there are something like 170 nerve endings in the ear. And if you're listening to middle C, it's not because there's a sensor, a nerve ending that relates to um, middle C. It's because sensors number 1, 27, 64, and 99 are all firing, and your brain says, ah, that's middle C. So
yeah,
when you lose any of your senses, it really plays havoc with your hearing. As a lot of old people, I mean, both my brother and my sister, they both, slapped their mobile phones to their head, and they both lost their hear, both losing their hearing. What can I
yeah,
tell you?
very interesting. And I've had some conversations with Professor Ulla Johansson, and
Oh yeah.
there's this hypothesis that the tinnitus, or the ringing of the ears, might be the sentinel symptom of people who truly have electrohypersensitivity, or electrical sensitivity, whatever we want to call it. So that,
Okay, I'm laughing because um, I had to move to the remotest Wales, and I was fortunate to find a house that didn't have any neighbours and didn't have any signal, and it was just ideal. They've now put two masts either side of the house, so
Oh no.
it's not anywhere I can live. But I used to wake up in the middle of the night with tinnitus screaming through my head. Um, it also one of the disadvantages of this house was that it was under the drone test fly zone, the UAV test fly zone for Wales. There's two test fly zones in Britain, and I happen to be under one of them, but that's
Mm.
another story. And I suspected that this tinnitus might be being caused by radio waves coming through the roof because there was nothing else anywhere near.
Hmm.
So coming out of the sky. So I built a foil helmet,
Oh yeah, okay.
a complete helmet, with just a little hole down at the bottom so I could breathe. And I put it on, and can you guess what happened?
Well, did it go away or was it reduced?
Suddenly, I discovered that there were five tinnitus frequencies going on in my head, and four of them vanished instantly.
Oh no, that is very interesting. And I'll just take a moment to mention I have long suspected, people when you propose the idea that replacing the natural electromagnetic environment of the Earth with a synthetic one that could possibly be harmful, they'll call you a tinfoil hat conspiracy theorist. So
Hmm.
people who know the genesis of the term conspiracy theorist know where that came from. And the fact that it was tagged so long ago with a tinfoil hat, which, as you've just pointed out, can actually be effective in reducing the radiation, just seems.
There's more to it than that, also.
Yeah, let's
So,
hear it.
so what's more to it is this, that I discovered that I could then take it off after about 10 minutes and I could go back to sleep and the tinnitus wouldn't return, or it wouldn't return so much as to keep me awake.
Oh, have
So
you
it's
tried?
not only a diagnostic technique, so quite frankly, because in my case, I don't know if it's true for everyone, but in my case, tinnitus is the first sign that I'm in a hot environment.
Hmm.
In my case, that was my experience. Now, I didn't need anybody to tell me to do that or not do that. I didn't have to explain. I certainly didn't let the neighbors see me. Not that there were any neighbors, but you know what I mean.
Yeah, I do.
And it was an eye opener. It was an eye opener. And quite frankly, I keep a foil helmet with me all the time
Very
for
interesting.
for when I'm being absolutely wasted out of the sky.
So there can be a lot of sources of tinnitus. So, for example,
Yeah.
trunk line radio is interesting because it maintains this carrier between frequencies, and a lot of people don't understand what that's about. And there are other things like, well, I noticed you had an article on ADSL,
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah.
which can be very troublesome, and so
But there's a special kind of tinnitus that we get here in the UK, and I think it's courtesy of British Telecom or the smart meters, and it sort of goes and on and on and on and on and on and on and on. And normally you get it upon waking. Well, I haven't had that now in years, but it used to be common.
wow, is that optimized for maximum harm or just
Oh, well, let's
meant to
not
be
get
a
into
happy
that.
sound in the morning or what?
No, it's not. It's a sound that's designed to make you go absolutely nuts. But no, I think it's to do with power line communications or something riding on the phone lines. Because that's another thing. On about 3 o'clock in the morning, not every day, but about 3 o'clock in the morning, the telecoms company used to send a radio pulse down all the phone lines and listen for the echoes so that they would know your phone line was broken before you even woke up in the morning.
Yeah, and people don't realize that anything that goes over a wire is liberated into the environment.
Well,
Uh,
dirty electricity.
yep, yep. And so people don't understand that. They say, "What's the problem with dirty electricity?" And the problem is that it's not constrained to the wire. When you pass something over the wire, it ends up in the environment.
Like, like I, Like I said, Keith, if they say, well, dirty electricity was the problem, they're not paying for that information, are they? They ain't gonna listen.
Interesting. Yeah, we have PLC smart meters here.
40 kilometers, the signal will go from a smart meter down PLC.
Mm, that's amazing. And I don't know. I don't want to be an apologist for the power company. There are two electric utilities where I live. We have a very mountainous area with favorable terrain if you're trying to escape terrestrial RF sources.
Mhm.
And you use the terrain properly. I think that's our only long-term help. But unfortunately, one of the electrical utilities in the county in which I live uses PLC, which is yeah, it's a nightmare. Communicating over, sending these modulated signals over unshielded wiring, it just broadcasts that everywhere.
I know.
So I really don't know which is worse, RF emitting meters, which of course you can shield in certain cases,
Okay.
but then you've got the residual from all of your neighbors if you're living near other people, and the conglomerate or the aggregation of all those tiny, tiny signals, maybe even most of them unmeasurable. I don't think we really understand what the health effects are of that. So, although you may be able to shield your own RF emitting meter, I've got concerns about that all the little bitty residual
Okay.
leftover. What do you think about that?
Well, that brings me to one of my underlying philosophies, which is it's all toxic.
Absolutely, it's
So
not.
I suffered for 30 years with multiple chemical sensitivity, and which is a precursor for electrical hypersensitivity. You may or may not know that. And
I know they were comorbid. I didn't know it was a
yeah,
precursor.
yeah, yeah. Well, comorbid precursor, they go together. Um,
They do go
and
together for sure.
and we don't know why, but there must be some mechanistic link between them. Anyway, the long and the short of it is that I say to people, look, yes, it might be, you spent hours on the Game Boy, Xbox, or whatever it is, or you bought a new electric car, whatever the hell it is, and you spray your house with chemicals and you drink the tap water and all of that stuff. And my attitude is, you need to reduce your total toxic burden. That's it. That's chemicals, it's electromagnetic, it's psychological. You may have toxic friends who don't really support you, or whatever you need to do to reduce your total toxic burden. That's my underlying philosophy.
Yeah, and the only thing I would add is once you've done that, then you need to embrace the signal that matters,
Well,
which
indeed,
is
indeed, I don't discount that at all. You're absolutely right.
embrace nature. Go for a slow walk in the woods.
Yeah, all of
Um,
that.
Walk by some moving water and just
Hmm.
enjoy the nature.
Hmm.
Um, you know, get some sunlight in your eyes. Those types of things. What do you agree that embracing that is very restorative as well?
I have a lot of it amongst my friends. I have a lot of people who are electrohypersensitive. I was a trustee of ESUK, which is a UK charity. It's really there's only two, but it is the charity for electrohypersensitives in the UK. And so I know a lot of electrohypersensitives. And I was talking to the wife of a guy who's terribly electrosensitive, and she has to do everything, all the cooking, all the taking the kids to school. She has to do it all. And she said, the word that just characterizes my life is grief. My life is just full of grief. And I wasn't quite sure what to say to that because it kind of stopped me in my tracks. But I said, well, there is another word beginning with G that you might like to consider, and that's gratitude for all the things you do have and not all the things you don't have.
Absolutely right. Absolutely right. We used to be kind of crude in the way we would talk about it in the ambulance business. We would say, as long as you're moving air, in other words, as long as you're breathing. And so being grateful for your heart beating. You're able to breathe. You're still alive. Maybe the sun is shining outside. Those types of things. Another thing that Professor Johansson shared with me is a colleague of his. He was explaining, um, did a I don't know what you'd call it, not an experiment, but a study of people who were truly electrically sensitive. And what he said, and I'm paraphrasing, is that the colleague found, and he was not a believer of EHS or any of that, but what he found was that we are in every way the same psychologically, except that we are much tougher. We are much more resilient to adversity, and I thought that was very, very interesting because we
Well,
we certainly do
go
have
on.
challenges from the loss of friends and even loved ones who just can't accept to how difficult it is to find a place to live that's safe and whatnot. So I understand what you're saying with this friend you were helping.
Well, um, we are in possession of a secret that the rest of the world doesn't want to hear. And we've been going to the rest of the world saying, woe is me, listen to what we have to say, blah, 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 blah. And they're not listening. And I'm of the opinion to turn it on its head. We know stuff that the average person in the high street with their cell phone shoved in their back pocket or slapped to the head has no idea about. And when they come to us and they want us to tell them the secret, then they'll listen.
And I'll continue and say, until that day, they not only don't want to hear it, they are incapable of hearing it. Would you
It's
agree?
true. I agree. Um, the power of the media, the propaganda machine, is so all pervasive that if you get the same story from, I don't know, half a dozen different sources, and they're all saying the tinfoil hat brigade are all lunatics and they're delusional and you can feel sorry for them, but they don't know what they're talking about. Well, if you get that message and you see it in movies, you see it in newsprint, you see it in advertisements, you see it, once you start to notice it, you see it everywhere. Then for the average person, they're so inundated with this propaganda that they can't see the wood for the trees. It's not their fault, but they can't.
And somehow or another, the survivors develop the ability to be immune to that. Whereas perhaps for most of or all of their life before that, they were susceptible to, I'll just say, propaganda standing in the place of science and reason. And then, the survivors, they really develop, in my experience, the ability to not be affected by that. And I don't know how that works exactly, but
Well, one of the ways I keep myself immune from that is I don't watch the news. I don't watch television. I'm very selective about what I watch because you cannot unsee something that you have once seen. And you cannot unsee something that you have seen subliminally. You don't even know that you've seen it.
exactly right. Yeah. My wife and I'm not sure if we ever had TV. I guess we maybe did when we were first married, but it's been more than 30 years that we have had not had television. So I think that's a big factor because there is a lot of programming in the programming, if you will. And
Absolutely.
I
Absolutely.
my knowledge of the news comes from my eyes being shut as tightly as I can and not looking at any of that. And then whatever can make it through secondary or tertiary sources is more than enough for me
Yeah,
to
as you say,
understand
more than enough.
what's going on in the world. Yeah.
Well, one of the things I learned as a project manager was this, that you never take on responsibility for something that you don't have the corresponding authority to discharge. Because if you do, your stress level will just go stratospheric.
Absolutely right. Yep, I agree.
So if you take on responsibility for all the troubles of the world that you see on the nightly news, you have no way of discharging that responsibility. People don't realize they don't even think about it. So my nephew came to stay, and I got absolutely catapulted awake at 6 o'clock in the morning. And he said, I'd said to him when he arrived, turn off your Kindle, turn off your smartphone, turn off your laptop, turn off everything. He said, yeah, I've turned it all off. And the following morning at 6 o'clock, like I said, I got catapulted out of bed, and I got my acousticom out, and sure enough, the signal was coming from his room. And you know what it was? He said, "Oh, maybe it's the Chipolo." And I said, "What the hell's a Chipolo?" And he said, "Well, it's the tracker my dad gave me. It's attached to my keys. I keep losing them." Well, fancy that.
No.
And what had happened was one of the forestry lorries, because I was living in the forest, one of the forestry lorries went past at 6 o'clock in the morning with his smartphone on, and it woke the Chipolo up. And the
Ah,
Chipolo then spends 10 minutes trying to get a signal.
mm.
And that's what catapulted me out of bed. So oftentimes people have no idea that the device they've got is really wise. And anyway, we'd had a very pleasant evening and I'd not been affected at all. That was because there was no signal and the thing had gone to sleep.
Mm.
You couldn't
Yeah,
make it up, could
I started last year. I started teaching EMF consultants, and I do it
you? Yeah, I saw that.
in a facility we call an exclusion facility. It's a place without so much as a cell phone signal, and it's very very peaceful and a very beautiful view of the lake and the mountains and whatnot.
Oh, if I could
And
fly, I'd come there.
pardon me?
If I could fly, I'd come there.
Yeah, yeah. I think you'd enjoy it. So anyway, I had a couple of students that arrived, and the first day we start doing assessment work. It's assessment and lecture, but then half the time is spent. I take them out on doing assessments with me,
Hmm.
and I can do that because I only accept 2 students at a time.
Hmm.
Because you can't troop 30 people into somebody's home and hope to maintain some
No.
semblance of
Yeah.
normalcy. But anyway, the very first time I'm getting them to assess the facility that we're in, I'm finding all this RF that shouldn't be there. And I'll make a long story short. Each of them had at least 3 of these Apple AirTags
Yeah. Same
that
thing.
they had already unpacked their luggage and they couldn't find where they were. And I said, okay, well, this is a good exercise then. And I showed them, how you can locate something and make sure that you found where it's coming from and whatnot. But yeah, just to echo and agree with what you're saying is people just don't understand how their choices are increasing their personal radiation exposure.
It's not that they believe it all works by magic. They just never thought about it at all.
Right. Right.
I mean, and like I say, if the propaganda machine is telling you it's all perfectly fine, and I mean, if you go on my blog, you'll see I've got 100 and I think it's 156 things that people tell themselves when they're on their mobile phones. And
I
one of
read
them
that,
is,
by the way, and that was an impressive compilation, have to say.
well, I'm working on another one, which is 156 things that people don't say to themselves on their mobile phones. But anyway, the long and short of it is, I used to slap the phone to my head and I used to say, well, yeah, there's been some studies, but if they prove it causes cancer, then I'll cut down. Right? I mean, that's where most of those things came from because I've said them to myself,
Hmm.
when I was that person on his phone all the time. And well, I made the list because people don't realize that they're running these meta programs, these back programs in background in their head which are driven by propaganda and God knows what else, and their belief system. And it runs their lives. What can I tell you? That's why I kind of illuminated it in that list.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that if I were to say that the choices most people make are not their own. I'm not sure how many would really resonate with that, but I think you might agree that
Yeah, that's a steep hill, but I agree.
yeah, people have the feeling that they're making independent decisions when yeah, if you really study the matter, and
Oh,
if they really understood all their exposures and how
and now we're getting
repetition, yeah,
now we're getting into repetition, repetition. Now we're getting into the realms of belief systems and stuff like that. And well, it's a long way from electromagnetism.
it is a long way. So we'll steer out. We'll talk about that another day. But so this has been a good conversation or a good first conversation. Is there anything else you'd like to talk about today?
Yeah, let me just look at my list. Um, oh yeah, so I have two types of client. I wanted to tell you this. I don't know whether you have two types of client. Well, actually, I've got two lots of two types of client. The first one is this. There is the client who just wants the problem fixed. They want to get their old life back. Okay, tell me what's wrong. I'll pay you money, fix it. And there's the other type of client who says, I can't do this anymore. I've got to find another way. And so, I have to, I used to tailor all of my reports to the individuals, um, so that everyone's custom written, because it depends on the person's ability to absorb the information that you're giving them, and also their relationship to risk and anxiety and all that kind of stuff. So those are the two types of clients. But I've also I had to make a distinction. One of the surveys I did taught me the distinction between the commissioning client and a paying client. Now, I don't know if you make a distinction in your terms and conditions, but I do. And that means that the person who pays is not necessarily the one who gets the report.
Mm.
All of my work is entirely confidential and it goes to the commissioning client. So I'll give you an example of that. The wife was electrosensitive and she asked me to do a survey. The husband is skeptical, but he pays for it.
Ah,
She gets the report. If she shares it with her husband, that's up to her. But if
right.
she chooses not to, that's also up to her. And where this came to the fore was when I did a survey of a house for the son of one of my clients. Okay, so the client paid, so the son got the survey for free, but my client wanted to protect her grandchildren, and so she had me do a survey of his house. I wrote the report, didn't hear any more. Sometimes you do, sometimes you don't. Until I heard that he was watching his 12-year-old son die from a brain tumor.
Oh my goodness.
And it turns out he never showed the report to his wife, and her wireless office was underneath the child's bedroom,
Oh my goodness.
right?
Yeah,
You
very
can
sad.
imagine.
Very sad.
So if and so a second report was requested of my report, a second copy of my report was requested. And I said, well, if he, as the commissioning client, asks for another copy, I'll send it to him. But you as the paying client, I won't send it to you. So that gives you an indication of how you have to be, if you're going to be confidential in your work, you need to be very clear about the implications of what it is you're saying.
Yeah, and this is I do a lot of writing that never actually makes it to
Me too.
publication, and someday I'll wade through all of this. And I did something the other day. I think it was 12 things a new consultant needs to know. And I really do encourage people to get into this area of consulting, or you call it surveying.
Me too. If I
Um,
could find people who were competent
yep, exactly right. We
and
need
trustworthy and all that.
yes, absolutely right. And not using it as a sales call in somebody's house and that kind of thing. But um, there's a lot of subtlety, I would say, to doing the work well and really understanding where people are coming from. So I agree with what you're talking about in terms of understanding exactly where somebody is. And I think somebody else, Sheena, put this to me one time, of meeting people where they are. And
Yeah.
yeah, so I do aspire to do that. And I've seen, like you have, the person who has requested the assessment may not be the one who's paying for it. And sometimes you'll have family members wanting you to come in and tell them they're crazy. Essentially, they don't ever say it that way, but they want you
Sure.
to assure them that these exposures are whatever, that they're okay. And
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
sometimes you have people come in and then they say, now convince my teenage daughter. Well, how you know, so you do have all these really subtle situations that you get into, and I think it's delightful. I just enjoy being with people, dealing with people, and if I can motivate some productive change that results in lower exposures for them, I'm a happy guy.
Well, I entirely agree. And quite often you'll get the partner who says, I've reluctantly, they don't say this, but what they mean is, I've reluctantly agreed for you to come and survey this house, but I hope you won't contribute to my partner's delusions.
Right, exactly. Yeah. Yeah, and I've seen them like buy one house after another, that's completely uninhabitable because of that kind of
Oh,
attitude.
the pre-purchase survey, people have no idea how valuable that can be
Yeah.
until they've been in the place for 6 months and they have to leave.
And that is not inexpensive. That it is a lot of money to take a house you've just gotten into and then pay the eight.
Well, yeah, yeah, yeah. One thing people ask me is, well, where can I find a house that's safe? And I say, I have no idea. I say, you find a house and I'll tell you if it's safe.
Yeah, yeah, I agree.
Can't do it any other way.
At the
Anyway,
at the bottom of a deep canyon, that might be
yeah.
safe.
Well, I would say halfway down a deep canyon
Oh yeah, there you go.
because at the bottom it's all moldy and misty and wet and damp.
Yes, true.
So we didn't even talk about mold and other cofactors, but let's not even go there.
Yeah, that mold is comorbid for sure with electrical sensitivity. I think I had a chance to talk to a fellow who had been electrically sensitive for 80 years or a little bit over 80 years. I
Wow.
thought my 41 years of suffering was a lot. But his theory was that what those two things had in common was demyelination of the nerve sheath,
Oh yeah.
that they both demyelinated the nerve sheath. So I thought that was interesting.
Well, it's a bit like a short circuit. Um, we could, yeah. The whole electrical conductivity of the human body and how it all works is a whole other area. But I mean, we all know that we're electrochemical beings, and it's pretty obvious that you can't. I mean, think about it. Man-made electromagnetic radiation, it's only been around for like 150, 250 years at best. And how long has it taken us to get to where we are today? Well, I don't know, but it's a lot longer than that. And so um, uh, here's the question for you: how much is too much?
The answer is any.
Well, that's the approach that I take. But
Honestly,
well,
Arthur Furstenberg has this great packet. I understand it's no longer available, but it was called I think it's called the wireless packet or something like that. And Belyaev was the name of this researcher, and he showed alteration of, I think it was E. coli bacteria at some
oh yeah, yeah,
impossibly low level
yep,
of RF radiation exposure. And so when none of your survey meters go down that low, and people are living in these cities where they have 1 million units of, million microwatts per square meter of RF, and they're feeling good about that because they know somebody else who has 2 million or whatever, and you realize it's nothing to the left of the decimal point is going to be helpful, and you may be 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 to the right of the decimal point. So yeah, I think the answer is really any is too much.
Well, okay. So that just brings me to one more thing I wanted to mention to you, which we haven't used the term so far, but I use it a lot, and that is the difference between elective and non-elective exposure.
My wife is encouraging me. I used to call it involuntary. She says she says you should call it forced. So lately
Yeah.
in my writing, I differentiate voluntary and forced exposures,
Yeah, that's better.
and
That's
I
better.
reference the UK, my friend, because the castle doctrine. That
Well,
what is it? Quiet,
that old chestnut.
quiet enjoyment of the home. Right? Is that ringing any
Yeah,
bells?
something like that. Yeah.
And we have some diluted version of that in the United States as well. But yeah, that's gone. There are these forced exposures. So what people view as service, what it really means is forced exposures. Yeah, happily I live in the forest, so we have.
Yeah, and you're off grid. So, but as you so rightly say, off grid has its own issues.
Oh, it does. Yeah, we're back on the grid, and I think I'd like to be off again. But for anybody who's listening who doesn't already know this, alternative energy is dirty energy. By definition, having an inverter
Yeah.
is really
Yeah.
problematic. And I even ran DC only for a while, and then the problem there is voltage converters. So I think
Yeah.
DC is the way to go, but if you can avoid the voltage converters.
Yep. It's it's a complicated field, and it's getting more complicated every day. And we do our best to keep up and explain this to people in terms that they can understand. But we live in a technological world.
Yeah, so for a consultant to do well, they have to understand all of this, not to start out. And everybody starts out with baby steps. Everybody starts doing a basic assessment. And I would say for new consultants, you have to go through the beginning so you can get to the later on. You can't start at a level of performance way up here, but eventually, if you're any good, you've got to know all of this stuff.
When I
27 other
started
things.
out, when
Yeah.
I started out, there was less than half a dozen people in the UK doing surveys of any description. And when I started out, I didn't know everything I needed to know. But if I didn't get started, I wouldn't know anything. So I had to go with what I had. And I had to learn as I went along. And, over time, I picked up a thing here or picked up a thing there and learned about, I don't know, 10 gigahertz motion sensors, for example. I don't know if you must have them in the States. They're made by Hewlett Packard. And so, yes, you're right. You do need to know about all this stuff. But the fact is, it is so vast that to know it all, you you have to be able to know enough to be able to give something of value to the client who's paying preferably handsomely for your services.
Yes. Yeah. Very well said. Very well said. So let's go ahead and draw this to a close because we've been
Yeah.
recording
Okay.
for a while. You and I can chat afterwards, but I'm just going to say for until our next meeting, Roger, I just want to thank you for reaching out, for all that you've shared on this interview, for the service that you've provided to your fellow man while you were working as an EMF consultant. I have just discovered your blog. I don't know if that's something you want to share with people.
It's a public blog. It's a public blog, and it's me. It's my opportunity to have a rant about whatever's eating me at the time. And if people get value out of it, so much the better. A lot of people will just dismiss it, but it's taken me 30 years to put together. What can I tell you?
Yeah, so go ahead and give the address how people can find that.
It's Electric Forester at blogspot.co.uk.
So, Roger, thank you. Um, thanks for your time here on the EMF Remedy podcast.
Well, thank you, Keith. It's been a pleasure, and I hope you got something out of it. I certainly have, and I hope in future other people may get something out of it too.
All right, cheers.